This is Henna from Dawn of Peace, and thank you for tuning in to the Authentic Podcast. The spiritual sickness at the core of our human family is that we've lost our morals and become followers of a lie. Therefore, the remedy to our collective malady is finding our way back to the path of truth and principles of harmony, to natural law. And I cannot think of a human being with more experience, knowledge, and merit to speak with about this matter than Mark Passio. I am absolutely honored to have you on the show today. Welcome, Mark.
Henna, thank you so much for bringing me on the show. It's an honor to be here.
Great. Well, before we get into the crux of it, just a short intro for those of my viewers who have not yet come across Mark and his phenomenal work. Mark is a world-renowned teacher of natural law and the sacred path of truth. He has a very unique background, as you actually started out as a priest in the satanic tradition of dark occultism. And then you've since left the religion, and now you are exposing their agenda and equipping people with the esoteric knowledge to demystify the occult and help liberate people from spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical slavery. So in a nutshell, Mark, you've dedicated your life to the one great work.
You know, I really think that it's all about freedom. And if people haven't made that connection, that the end goal of spirituality is to be really free to express our rights and to bring forward our consciousness in the ways that we so choose, as long as we're not harming others, that they haven't really made that connection about what true spirituality is about. You know, when I got involved in dark occultism when I was young, I thought it was just learning about the human psyche in such a way that you could get, a leg up on your fellow man. But when I realized that it was about enslaving everyone, and destroying human freedom, I didn't sign up for that. And that's when I, started to turn my life around and look into positive forms of occultism and true spirituality. And that led me down the path of realizing that, the missing link that a lot of people were missing in that whole field was true freedom, and not just in the sense of being free spiritually, not just in the sense of even being free mentally, but physical freedom as well, to exercise our rights as human beings, as unique expressions of consciousness, again, so long as we are not harming others.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's astounding to me that isn't at the heart of every religion and every spiritual tradition today. It seems like it's just been wiped out from the picture. Nobody talks about freedom anymore.
Well, a lot of traditions, fall into dogmatic practices, and they want compliance instead of, freedom of expression. Religion turns like that in almost every single religious tradition. It's gone in that direction. And even in, New Age circles, it seems to be more about, practices, instead of, ideals and principles. That's not necessarily a blanket statement, but it holds largely true. If I run in some New Age circles or go to a New Age expo or something to that effect and ask people, if they are going to vote Democrat or Republican, 99% of them fall into one of the two false left-right paradigm categories. You see very few people saying government is slavery, which it is. It's just a euphemism for slavery. It's an amalgamation of power. It's based on authority. This is the idea that that some people have the legitimate right to rule, and other people have some sort of an obligation to obey their rulings. And in the ancient world, that was called kingship, and now it's just diffused among a few people, an oligarchical few, and they're called government. But in so-called spiritual circles, you don't get that understanding. They still fall into the false dichotomy, still believing in authority, in the illusion of authority. It's because people don't want to really take the hard lined approach to looking at what rights are, and what true good and right and wrong are, as far as behaviors are concerned.
Absolutely. So funny you brought up the spiritual, the New Age tradition straight away, because that was actually going to be my first question to you. That
Okay.
if you would enlighten our viewers that what is the origin of that movement, what you know about it.
Well, I mean, I think as with any movement, it starts off with good intentions, and I've talked a lot about intentions versus actuality, where I don't think intentions are as important as what actually comes out of something as far as behavior is concerned, thought and behavior. Intentions could be very well placed and very well meant, but they can go awry very quickly. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that the total origins of New Age belief systems are in dark occultism, but I would say that they have been co-opted by the dark occult. When I was involved in Satanism and dark occultism, the higher up members of some of those movements and what they call grottos, which are their versions of covens, told me that they had already infiltrated the publishing houses of many New Age groups, and that they were going to be putting out a lot of false spiritual teachings through these publishing houses, through the books that would be coming out in the future. And, at first I didn't believe that they necessarily had that kind of influence and power, and, thought that they were boasting. But when I saw a lot of the false spiritual teachings that were coming out of New Age publishing houses in the coming years, I realized that they were telling me exactly the truth, that they had this type of influence and power and capability, and they did exactly what they said that they were going to do. They said that they were going to put out a lot of false spiritual teachings, such as solipsism, this idea, the belief that there is no such thing as truth. They told me that they were going to pump out a lot of things having to do with moral relativism, which means that there's no such thing as right or wrong, that right and wrong are kind of arbitrary things that we can decide for ourselves, that it's not for us to discover, that we can actually arbitrate it, that we can just say what right and wrong are for ourselves, and many other things, false timelines, parallel universes, lots of things, or even like savior mythos, savior complexes. Like they told me that they were going to put out anything that dissuaded people away from looking at the actual truth and really trying to get to true freedom, anything that would take them off of that path. And those are things like solipsism, moral relativism, believing in an external savior that's going to come and rescue us from ourselves and from our own ignorance, anything except teaching true spirituality, true difference between right and wrong behavior, true objective difference between right and wrong, real morality, what real freedom actually is, and how to obtain it, and true personal responsibility. They didn't want that interjected into these spiritual teachings. They wanted anything but that. They wanted everything that would take people off of the path of rebellion against authority, of rejection of authority, and of understanding natural law. That's what dark occultism wants at its core, and that's what it's really designed to do, to act as a manipulation tactic, and to act as what I call a channeling away from the truth, or I call the New Age movement a cul-de-sac. It's something that keeps us off the path, off the direct path of truth, that reroutes us, and takes us in a direction that we don't really want to go, but it gets us to believe that we want to go there.
Yeah. And what I see, I've been in my training to learning natural medicine in the Amazon, and it was kind of a mystery school, learning the Shipibo art of healing. What I saw as well is that a lot of people had, when they found that New Age philosophy, it becomes dangerous in a way, because you feel like you've become enlightened without having done the shadow work. So a lot of people, they like to get the shortcut of like sitting like a Buddha and like professing how love and light you are, but then having like this volcano underneath that you've never looked at, or not, looking at what's actually happening in the world and living in this bubble of like this false enlightenment. Right. That's what I see a lot.
Without a doubt. And, that's not going to help the world situation. As people have done that, look at what has occurred. Tons of freedoms have been destroyed throughout all of Western civilization, really throughout the world in general. And, we're in a further deep dark situation as far as human rights are concerned, and control has really, become the norm. Has become what they are touting as the normal way of life, is taking people's freedoms and keeping them under deep lockdown and control. There's nothing spiritual about that. There's nothing spiritual in the tolerance of that. That situation is, if we strip all the euphemisms away, a small group of people, an oligarchical group of people calling themselves government, basically declaring themselves as God and declaring themselves as the owners of other people, and laying out dictates that they say other people must follow. And if they don't follow them, they will commit violence upon them, or send their order following class, the military and or the police, to do violence upon people. And there's nothing spiritual in any of that situation. There's nothing spiritual in doing that. There's nothing spiritual in condoning it. There's nothing spiritual in staying in the fear that they're pumping out through their mainstream media and telling people that they have to remain in fear over some alleged disease that doesn't really have that much of a deadly impact on human society any more than a flu did, or any more than any other disease did that we've been living with for hundreds of years. So it's all fear, it's all manipulation, and it's people buying into it. And then again, as you said, just having total tolerance for that immoral situation and saying, oh, it's okay as long as I remain calm. This is a tactic to keep people enslaved. That's not a tactic to awaken. That's, as you said, that's a false awakening. This whole woke movement is a false awakening. The whole false teachings of the New Age movement lead to a false awakening. True awakening will lead you to the understanding of horrors. And that's what a lot of people don't want to recognize, because they don't want to look at that deep, dark aspect of where human society has gone, where human civilization has gone. Real awakening is, I've laid out in a presentation that I call Streetwise Spirituality, 20 points of what I consider true awakening. But real awakening is the understanding that authority is an illusion. Real awakening is the understanding that human beings are enslaved. Real awakening is the understanding of the actual objective difference between right and wrong behavior. Real awakening is knowing what a right is, an action that does not initiate harm to another sentient being, and understanding that if people are condoning actions that initiate harm to other people, including taking their rights away, that's no right at all. That's a wrongdoing, and we should not engage in that behavior or condone it. That's what awakening is all about. And when you see the state of human civilization and culture and society, you should be horrified by what you see, by what people believe and what they do, not feel all love and light and peace. You should realize what the great work is to do to change, and realize we're nowhere near obtaining that change. We're nowhere near obtaining that goal of human freedom and true enlightenment. And that's what the great work is, the realization that humankind is in a deplorable state, and asking yourself the question, if you do get your own mind and your own heart straightened out and understand what the human condition truly is, what are you going to do to help change it for the better?
Totally. And I love when you bring about the whole realization that the inaction is also a choice, and it also has a consequence. Because a lot of people say, not in my reality, and as long as I'm good, my reality is good, it doesn't matter. And they choose inaction, but that has a consequence as well, because we create the reality together, right? It's an aggregate thing.
Of course, it's not about each individual creating a separate reality for themselves for any type of a selfish purpose, or just to see their own individual goals fulfilled. We are co-creating our shared reality in which we all must live. This whole idea that it's all just infinite possibility for the individual. Okay, it's only true up to a very limited extent. In your own life, you have a certain amount of things that you can control for yourself, that you can create for yourself. But there's always influence from other people. And, what the real goal is to together co-create a better reality for everyone. That's how natural law actually functions. Natural law isn't this cartoonish version of karma whereby you do a bad behavior and you set one foot outside your door and a piano drops from the sky and falls on you. Okay. Natural law is a slow process over the aggregate of humanity, of conditions of the whole earth, of the whole entire environment in which we all live, changing over time, that is, in a way, not ultra perceptible to the individual, but it happens over generations of time, and things get progressively either worse or better depending on the aggregate human behavior. See, karma works over the collective. It doesn't just work over the individual. I'm not saying it doesn't work upon the individual, but largely natural law / karma works over the collective consciousness. It works over the collective or aggregate behaviors of human beings. This is summarized in natural law by what I refer to personally as the law of freedom. The law of freedom is that freedom and morality are directly proportional to each other. It's almost like a mathematical equation of spirituality. The collective or aggregate moral behaviors, when summed up, actually are in direct proportion to the amount of aggregate freedom that is experienced in society. So as morality increases collectively, freedom increases collectively. And as morality declines collectively, freedom declines collectively.
Yeah, I mean, look around what's happening now. It's pretty clear that we have done this ourselves, because our morals have become completely corrupted and we don't even know what's right and wrong anymore. So how could we create freedom?
Right. I mean, that's the irony, and the sad part about all of this is that we have become so ignorant as a civilization, as a species, that we really collectively do not know the difference between right and wrong anymore. And that sounds strange to people when they first hear it. And even in New Age circles in particular, a lot of people have been told in the New Age movement there is no such thing as right and wrong, which is moral relativism. And that has to be completely shunned and rejected, that notion that there's no such thing as right and wrong. There is absolutely right behavior. There is absolutely wrong behavior, and there is absolutely a difference between them. And what our goal needs to be is to definitively understand the objective difference between right and wrong. And then that's called conscience. That understanding, that knowing of the difference between right and wrong is conscience. That comes from the Latin consciere, which means to know together, okay, to collectively know. Okay. Once we collectively know, then we need to collectively choose. And as individuals, we choose. And as more individuals do it, the aggregate does it more and more. Okay. So the percentage goes up higher of people that are willfully choosing the difference between right and wrong, and they're willfully choosing right over wrong. Okay. And when we do that as a society, then we're going to see freedom increase. That is just how the natural law of freedom works. Freedom, the state of freedom or enslavement of an entire civilization, is governed by law, just like everything else is governed by law. Physical states of matter are governed by law, energy is governed by law, and morality is governed by law. Behavior is governed by law. There's no difference. It's just at one level, it's a physical aspect, and it's able to be seen or measured with scientific instrumentation. And when it comes to morality and behavior, we can't necessarily measure it that way, but it can be measured and observed by the state of freedom or enslavement that we are collectively co-creating as a species. If we look at that end result, we're going to realize how that got created, how it was generated by our behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's happening now is that everyone's complying with the current tyranny. So we know, based on natural law, that can only create more tyranny. Because whatever we do today is the causality that will create the future effect. So we know that this is not the way. Compliance will only create more enslavement.
Of course, it's the law of cause and effect. You can't add the same polarity to a dynamic and come out with the opposite polarity. Reality does not work that way, unfortunately. I give the example like it's taking a garden hose and putting the hose, turning it on and pouring the water onto a pile of clothes and saying, I'm going to dry these like this. It's insanity. It cannot work. And people have to understand how those dynamics work according to natural law and then align their behavior to them. And that takes deep commitment. It takes study. It takes personal responsibility, and above all else, it takes willpower. These are dynamics that you don't hear that much in the New Age movement. You hear like, oh, it's love and light, it's just meditate, just be, and those things are important. I'm not saying that they're not. I think that this knowledge ultimately leads to what true love is all about, which is understanding that there should be freedom of expression and freedom of creation for all beings. Okay, and that's not just for the human family; that's for the non-human animals on our planet as well. This idea that we can ignore the negative out of existence is never going to work. We have to acknowledge reality for exactly what it is, and that's a painful thing. That is what we refer to as shadow work in fields of occultism, and it's something that a lot of people are very loath to do. They don't want to do it because it's painful, and people in the short term want to avoid pain at all costs, and they want to do anything that brings a little bit of comfort or pleasure, because they feel that they have enough pain or trauma in their lives already, and they've experienced enough of that. They don't want to look at the hard things that are easy to just say, hey, let's shove them under the rug and ignore them, but if you say, hey, let's really drag those out, look at them directly and confront them, that's not an easy process. It's often very painful and even traumatic, and that's why a lot of people don't want to go through that dark night of the soul and do that shadow work. And the New Age movement sadly misses this dynamic of what our personal work is to do as individuals. And it's not to say that there isn't good things within it. There are good things. Meditation is something that should be learned and practiced. Absolutely. Managing our emotional states is something that should be learned and practiced for sure. Sometimes I need to do a much better job of that, because I get very angry at the injustices that I see around me.
I've seen you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that those things that you can learn in the New Age movement regarding the management of those states of consciousness are valuable. Absolutely. So you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You just have to realize that a good portion of this movement has been co-opted, and it's been co-opted for very sinister reasons. And some of the things that they're telling us not to look at or engage in are some of the most important things that we have to do. Looking at the negative is one of them. Understanding the difference between right and wrong is one of them. Willfully choosing through our free will and through our willpower the right action over wrong action, and really getting involved in doing things in the physical domain to change the state of our reality, and not just wishing it into being, not just having the intention for it to come into being emotionally and mentally. There's a missing step there, and that's taking action. That's the masculine aspect of our consciousness, is actual willpower and action, and that's kind of left on the back burner in the New Age movement, sadly.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. When I think of the key to how to heal within and heal without, I think of the words attributed to Jesus Christ, which say, if you do not bring forth what is within you will destroy you. If you do bring forth what is within you will save you. That's right. I see that in both dynamics. So if you don't bring forth your gifts, you will be enslaved by the burden of never having lived up to your fullest potential. And then again, if you don't bring forth your pain, you can never heal that pain, and you will be enslaved and haunted by that pain for the rest of your life.
Sure. Of course. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And I love that quote from the New Testament, because it's so true. I mean, imagine if we, say that we know, what morals are, and we say we're good moral people, and then we see all kinds of iniquities and injustices taking place around us. And not only do we not even speak out or do anything about it, but we're condoning them. That this is what people are doing through the support of government, and don't even realize it. They're actually condoning violence. I tell people, this is another thing, that New Agers, I think, have to particularly understand, is that there is no such thing as a moral government. It doesn't exist. One of the points that I highlight in Streetwise Spirituality about what a true awakening entails is understanding that authority is an illusion and that government is just the euphemism for slavery. That's one of the points in that seminar that I've given a while back. I think I gave that back in 2014, the Streetwise Spirituality seminar. And the New Age community, unfortunately, still believes that government is somehow morally legitimate and should exist, and they condone it. And it's like when you realize, as an individual, if I don't have a right to do something to my fellow human being, my fellow man, my fellow woman, okay, and to take that action would be a wrongdoing. It would be wronging them in some way. It would be harming them. It would be initiating harm against them, or it would be defrauding them of their property or their rights or their life, etc. And I don't have that right. There is no process in humanity that can be done to have a bunch of people come together that also, as individuals, do not possess that right to perform upon someone else, to grant that right to anyone else, or to delegate that right to anyone else. That's an illusory concept. That's illusion. That the only way that people believe that you can delegate a right that you don't possess as an individual is if they are under some form of mind control or mass manipulation of humanity to believe that that is how reality works, when in fact it doesn't work that way. If someone doesn't have $100, and if 10 people come together and all 10 of them don't have $100 collectively together, and you say you're going to give this 11th person $100, it cannot be done because you don't have it. And the same way that works for physical quantities of things, it works the same way with rights. If all the people together do not have the right to do this behavior because it is morally wrong for any of the individuals to perform it, they cannot all come together and magically create a right that does not exist in nature. That's how natural law works. The laws of nature are in fact set in stone. They are not up for negotiation or arbitration. A right is a right everywhere and at all times. Wrongdoings are wrongdoings everywhere and at all times, because a right is a behavior that does not initiate harm against others. So nobody can come together that doesn't have the right to perform the initiation of harm against somebody and say, we're going to give the right to perform that initiation of harm against other people to another group of people, to other individuals or other groups of individuals. It doesn't even make logical sense that you could do that. It's not possible in nature to do that, yet people believe that it is. And then what they do, because they've been manipulated into believing that that's somehow okay, is then they condone what government does. They say, well, this is just how it is. They got this power because we gave it to them, even though that doesn't make sense that we can give it to them. And then they condone what they are doing. And that makes them morally wrong, even in the condoning of it. And this is what they're not making the connection and seeing, is that anybody who is performing that level of violence against other people is morally wrong. And the people who are condoning it are ancillarily also morally wrong, because it's the equivalent of other people sitting back watching somebody commit violence against somebody and say, I condone that. I think that that's okay for them to do. And they haven't put that together. They haven't made that connection mentally and spiritually in their own consciousness yet. This is what people need to do. They need to understand what rights are. They need to understand that rights cannot be granted by man. They cannot be revoked by man. They exist inherently in nature. And they need to understand that we have to simply discover what they are and, then willfully choose to only engage in things that are rights and not engage in things that are wrongdoings. When we do that as a species, then we'll see things turn around. Until we make that, until we acquire that knowledge, which is conscience, and then use our personal responsibility and our willpower to engage in that decision-making process, and then ultimately the choice of rights over wrongs, that is the exercise of conscience. Until we do that collectively as a species, do not expect the human dynamic of slavery to improve or change. It cannot, according to law in the universe, in nature.
Yeah. And I see part of that dynamic is that people, they're living in this infantile victim consciousness, believing that they are not worthy of that responsibility, or they're not capable of making decisions for themselves. So it's like they've willfully giving that responsibility and their morals into the hands of their representatives. Yeah. That's how they do it in their mind. They think they know better, or they are the experts, even if it's about their own health or their own life or their livelihoods, they believe, honestly, they believe that these people have the right to do that. Yeah. I think that's how deep the mind control goes.
It's truly amazing, and the occultists, the dark occultists, have done a phenomenal job, at their manipulation game. They're very adept and skilled at what they do, even though they're psychopathic and evil. But make no mistake that they should not be underestimated as an enemy of humanity, because they very much are intellectually, they have a lot of intellectual acumen, they're intellectually advanced, and they really know what they're doing regarding the manipulation of the human psyche. And, what you were referring to, that people think that people should be represented by other people. It's like this idea of representative government is a flawed fundamental axiom of human understanding and behavior. You cannot give away your personal responsibility to do the right thing to anyone else. No one can tell you that. You have to discover it for yourself, and then you have to do it yourself. You can't give that responsibility over to anybody. And this even includes things like self-defense. We shouldn't be giving our right of self-defense over to anybody else. No one else can defend you like you can. That's why it has to be our responsibility. That's why I'm not for government. I'm not for policing. I'm not. See, people have to ask people, was kingship morally legitimate in the past? Does anybody in any even who consider themselves moral people today, do they look back in the past and go, that king, he had the right to do that. He was absolutely morally legitimate in claiming that he was the ruler of all those people, and it doesn't even make a difference whether it's a quote unquote benevolent kingship or a quote malevolent kingship. Is the notion of kingship, of the rulership of other people, that they don't have the right to decide what will happen with their lives, but one person did have that right to make a unilateral decision to say, I rule you, you're my subjects, and you must obey my commands. My edicts are law. Okay, is that somehow a moral construct? Is that moral? Is it actually right? And I think if any reasonable, logical, semi-functional human adult today who considers themselves a moral being, who considers that they're a good person, is going to say, no, kingship was never a moral concept. It was one person claiming that they had rights that they didn't have to rule everybody else, and other people believing in that claim. Well, ladies and gentlemen, government is the same thing as kingship. It is just that the power of rulership is just diffused. Instead of in one person, it is diffused amongst a few people collectively. If you look at the whole dynamic, it's a very, very small percentage of less than 1% of human beings, far less than 1%, okay, calling themselves a governmental body or institution that is claiming the same power. They are saying we can make the law of what you can and cannot do, regardless of how arbitrary it may be. It could be different at different times. It could be different in different places on earth. Okay, that makes it morally relativistic, and people can't even see that. They can't see the fundamental notion that there is no such thing as the right of someone to make those commands and dictate to other people and say, if you don't follow this set of arbitrary commands that I say is the law, that we say is the law, then you are going to be physically hurt, punished, or rights taken away or property taken away, when they don't have the right to do that, because no individual in that group has the right to do those immoral behaviors. We have to make that fundamental understanding as a species that the idea of authority in general has always been, is now, and always will be an illusion. It's an illusion. I call it the control disease. It's a virus that has infected humanity.
Yeah.
And the control disease is the perfect name for it. And most people are infected with it. That's one of the real viruses, ladies and gentlemen. Don't worry about COVID-19 as being one of the real viruses. That's not as harmful as the belief in authority. That's the real virus. Fear is the real virus. Lack of personal responsibility is the real virus. Lack of morality is the real virus. Okay. Being completely asleep and manipulated is the real virus. And absolutely, the belief in authority is the real virus, and the condoning of authority is the real virus. Those are things that are infinitely more harmful than some little cough or cold that's like a seasonal flu, believe me.
Yeah, completely. And part of that belief is also that somehow these dark occultists have managed to make us believe that we are a burden here, the human being is somehow by its very nature a problem. So we ourselves believe that if we had no rulers, it would be mayhem and arson and chaos. And you talk about that a lot, how, anarchy has been, made to equate chaos when it's just without rulers. But so people believe that. They say to me, oh, what would happen without government? It's like, oh my God, their worst nightmare. They're like, oh no, then we'll kill each other and we'll just like eat each other alive. When I go to a park or a beach, and I always see that as a kind of microcosmic, expression of what humanity could be like. I just see everyone from all colors and ethnicities and ages coexisting in harmony and just having a good time. I think that is what we could be if we just made, just got rid of this parasite, this false authority from this world.
It's really a matter of trust being manipulated. The occultists are very adept at manipulating people's perceptions. And then what people perceive, they're going to act upon, and that's what's going to create our shared reality. And the occultists are very good at manipulating people's sense of trust. They'll say that they trust themselves not to behave badly, but then when you say, would you extend that trust out to all of humanity? They'll say, oh, absolutely not. Yet their own eyes, like you said, just going into public, we act in an anarchic capacity almost continually in society until someone actually does violate someone else's rights. So then people will say, well, how would you deal with that? Well, you would deal with that with your own rights of self-defense and your own personal responsibility. I don't understand why people fear that so much. It's like they fear it because they're afraid of the physical reprisal that may happen to them if they get involved personally. So they want to take it and give it to a subset of people so they could ignore that aspect of reality. You can't take a subset of life and give it to a subset of people and say that's no longer my personal responsibility. That's illusion. That's the whole thing that has got us into this mess, is saying, well, I only want these parts of life as my responsibility, but these I want to detach and I want to sequester them away from me and let other people deal with them. That's called being a child cosmically. That's called being a child spiritually. That's saying, well, when some nasty things happen, and that just is, life is going to involve some things that we don't like and that cause pain. That nothing is going to be a utopic situation where there is perfect peace, harmony, and lack of pain and trauma. There is no such place. That's why the word utopia in Greek literally means nowhere. That literally there is no such place. The very word means illusion. Okay, it means something that you can only dream about, that's only a construct in the mind. Okay, there is no such thing as a utopic society. There's always going to be physical pain and trauma of some type. We don't need to inflict it upon ourselves. We don't need to make it worse like we're doing now. We can learn how to not inflict self-inflicted pain and trauma. We're not really learning that lesson collectively, unfortunately. But we could limit it, right? But you can never say, I'm going to take this little corner, slice it off of life, push it over here, and that's somebody else's problem, that I'm going to say, hey, we delegate this thing to you. Keep it away from us forever. It doesn't work that way. You cannot remove your responsibility to have to deal with unpleasantries yourself. And this is part of the other thing that people still have not gotten. You can never give away your right to self-defense. You can never give away your right to have to deal with people that will not respect the rights of other people. And yes, there are psychopathic people in our society like that, unfortunately, through whatever mechanisms created them: bad parenting, bad schooling, traumatic events in their own lives, brain damage, drug abuse, etc. You can go on and on for the things that create psychopathic behavior. But we cannot say we are not going to ever deal with that and confront it physically. Okay, or just give it to somebody else to confront physically. That's the problem, is that people don't want to take that aspect of personal responsibility unto themselves and do what needs to be done as a species together. It's not that like every single person would have to be alone in in that fight, in that battle, in dealing with those responsibilities, we could make approaches to deal with that together on a voluntary basis, and to just keep it to doing what is our right to do, not to step into the territory of starting to say, I have authority over other people and I'm going to preemptively command them and preemptively do bad things to them if they don't obey my decrees. That is what authority is. Authority is not someone has harmed me or an individual or a group of people, and we cannot do anything to defend ourselves. That's not taking authority, defending yourself. That's exercising a right that you already have under natural law.
Yeah, I see that that's, embedded in our culture, this infantile, this issue that we're immature spiritually and emotionally and psychologically. Like if you look at indigenous culture, they have these sacred rites, to prepare you into manhood or prepare you into womanhood. And you go through these rituals and ceremonies to test your strength, to grow your character. You go into fasting, you get buried underground, you get sent into the jungle and you have to find your way back by yourself. I mean, these kind of things to show that, look, we're not always here to protect you. Life can be hard. What do you do? Right. And that's what when I talk about awakening, because a lot of people think it's a patronizing term, but for me, awakening means awakening to your true nature.
Yes.
And all that it encompasses. And through that, of course, when we awaken to our inner nature, through that we awaken to everything, because as above, so below, and the law of correspondence.
Of course.
So our culture seems to be built this way, where we stay in this infantile mommy daddy dependency, whether it's mama modern medicine and daddy big government. It's just like, you do it on my behalf, I'm not good enough anyway, and I'm just going to mess it up. So
it really is about self-respect versus self-loathing. It's about personal responsibility versus abdication of responsibility, or attempted abdication. I describe it as attempted abdication of responsibility, because in nature, we cannot really abdicate that responsibility without negative consequence. So in our attempt to abdicate it, there is all this negative consequence and blowback coming back at us as a species. That's why we're experiencing what we are experiencing right now. I look at awakening as entering cosmic adulthood, entering true spiritual adulthood. The people who have bought into a lot of the new age deceptions have to just realize that they've been manipulated and duped in some aspects of it. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Take the good parts of it, okay? But realize there's been a lot of manipulation and untruths sold to you together with the truths. You need to go through that dark night of the soul of realizing, hey, we've been duped, we've been manipulated. Then you need to start filtering. You need to use the trivium method, which is a process of truth discovery, grammar, logic, rhetoric. And you filter out the inconsistencies that have been given to us through manipulation and dark occultism. You filter out those inconsistencies. You take what remains that is true, you take that with you, but you leave the rest behind. And that is going to help us in our journey to cosmic adulthood, to true spiritual awakening versus this false notion of what awakening means. Awakening does not just mean ignore the negative, only focus on the positive. Everything is good, everything is love and light. No, there is good and bad in just about everything. Okay, it is about personal responsibility. It is about looking at the real versus the illusionary. It's a rejection of the illusionary and the acceptance of the real. Natural law is real. It exists in nature. Our rights are real. The difference between right and wrong is real. There is evil in the world, and it is real, and it is actually exercising its power, not necessarily its rights, but it does have power. It has power to manipulate. It has power to deceive. It has power to hurt and destroy, and it's using it. It's doing that. It's actively doing those things, whereas we're largely sitting back and we are not fighting it. We are not actively engaged in the spiritual battle that is before us, because we believe somehow that this great evil calling itself government magically has rights that no one else does. Just like the king had rights that no one else does. The police don't have rights that other people don't have. As a matter of fact, they don't have the rights to do the things they're doing now. The military doesn't have rights that other people don't have. As a matter of fact, they don't have the right to be doing the things that they're doing now. People in government don't have rights that other people don't have. As a matter of fact, they don't have the right to do the things that they're doing now. This is what awakening is actually really about. And it's a painful, uncomfortable process. It's not a party. It's not fun. Okay. It's not even meant to be fun. The truth is, look at the truth as a horrible, you're just completely a figure that makes you want to vomit when you look at it. But you have to embrace it and love it and bring it into your arms and your heart. Okay. Even though it looks tragically, horrifically malformed and just gone. Okay. That is what truth is. Truth is not something that looks like the greatest thing that you've ever seen. When you discover truth, you shouldn't be like, oh, how lovely. No, when you discover the truth of what our reality has become, you should be horrified to such an extent that you're like, I'm going to dedicate my life to doing something to change this, to make it better. And that's the sad part of what religion and the New Age movement has sadly convince people not to do. They've convinced them to say, I want to find only the good things in life, only focus on those, and ignore all of this negativity that's happening all around us. Do you know what that absolutely ensures? It ensures the most negative outcome. That is how reality actually works, not the way a lot of New Age teachers have told us. To ignore the negative ensures what I refer to as the way of maximum pain. The way of maximum pain will be received by humanity if we continue to ignore the negative in our lives.
You know, Mark, when you were talking about like seeing the truth as like the ugliest, most horrendous thing that you have to bring into your arms, I just had this vision of like, it's the child that we created.
Yes.
Like, imagine if we realized that we are the parents that traumatized this child and turned it into a monster. That's basically the reality.
Great way of putting it.
The only way we can heal that, you know, monstrous kid that we've traumatized and destroyed is to take our responsibility of being a parent and love it back into wholeness. That's and joy right. And beauty and harmony and all of that.
Perfect way of putting it. Absolutely.
You know, another thing that I would like to us to talk about is the whole illusion of for the greater good. And I see that we're being asked to sacrifice, you know, our rights for the rights of others. And they're constantly talking about this for the greater good. And the way I've addressed it is, how can you sacrifice something which is not yours?
That's right.
So how can the government say that you talk about everything is about spiritual property. So if my rights are my property, then nobody has the right to sacrifice them, because you can only sacrifice that which is your own. I can sacrifice my time and energy if I choose to, but nobody can sacrifice my rights to protect people from illusory pandemic.
Right. And it's all fear-based. And, you know, the whole thing is that the greater good, the greatest aspect of the greater good is individual rights. Without individual rights, there is no, you know, doing anything for the greater good, because without individual rights, the total sum of humanity are slaves. This is what people have to realize. There's only one choice, folks. There's the choice between freedom and slavery. That's what you have to look at as God and the devil, if you want to put it in really simple religious terms. Okay. Yeah. Good and evil, God and the devil, okay, God and Satan, okay, are freedom versus slavery. The freedom to express yourself and make your own choices through your own free will, okay, and to learn the difference between right and wrong and choose the right over the wrong. Okay, that's freedom. Okay, not doing that is going to bring consequences, and it's going to be the consequences of moving in the opposite polarity. And the opposite polarity is slavery, control, lockdown, etc., where you don't have those rights to express yourself. You don't have your rights to choose. Okay, there is no such thing as a greater good that doesn't entail freedom. Freedom has to be the first value and the first principle that comes when we think about what the greater good is, because without that ability, there is no right to make decisions. There is no right to choose. There is no right ultimately to learn and to grow, which is what all of human experience and physical 3D experience is all about, learning and growing in consciousness. Without the right to do that, that's the removal of freedom if we don't have that right. And that's the state of slavery. In the state of slavery, free will doesn't exist. Okay, you are somebody else's chattel property. They can make up what right and wrong are, and you have to obey. And most of all, you don't have the right to learn and grow and advance your consciousness. What is spiritual in that? There's nothing spiritual in control and slavery, nothing whatsoever. That has to be completely and outrightly rejected for a person to even consider that they're even on the path to true spirituality.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of cattle, Mark, you yourself have ditched animals from your diet, right?
Of course. I've been
How
vegetarian.
did that happen for you?
Yeah, I've been vegetarian for, let's see, it's been since 2007. So that's over 13 years now. About 13 and a half years I've been vegetarian and haven't eaten meat. And then about 2 years back, it's a little over 2 years now, I went completely vegan. So around 2018, so maybe about a year and a half.
So how did people in the truther community receive that? How was the welcoming of your transitioning?
No,
to
not
completely...
not good at all. But for
good,
a
right?
small percentage of them, it was good, who had already understood that was a big part of the spiritual path. They received it well, but as far as the majority is concerned, not very well at all, and it lost me friends, and set people actually against me in my teaching and in my work. Sadly, how could people think that animals don't have rights? They want to live. They don't want to be consumed. This whole idea that we need animal flesh or products for our sustenance is not true. Folks, I'm strong, active, and healthy, and I don't consume animal products. I study martial arts. My martial arts teacher tells me that I picked up martial arts, one of the fastest and most effective of any of the students that she's ever taught, and the whole concept is I wasn't eating animal products while doing that. And you could be an active person. Athletes are often vegan and vegetarian. This idea that we need to consume animals for protein or for health, it just isn't true. Now, that being said, you don't want to do it cold turkey. That's why a lot of people, I think, don't go vegetarian or vegan successfully. Any change in diet needs to be done gradually, because you can upset balances that are already pre-existing in the body's systems. So if you do this suddenly and you don't do it gradually, you're going to see negative consequences in the reaction of the body. Absolutely. So I recommend to people to do it very gradually, start removing some items from the diet, and then just, keep doing that progressively over a longer stretch of time. Folks, it took me 12 years to become fully vegan, almost 12 years. Okay. So I'm not telling everybody suddenly cut out every animal product from your diet overnight. I would be doing harm if I told you that, because I know how that would probably end up. It wouldn't end up being a good balance for your body when you've gotten used to eating a certain way. Okay. But if you gently transition to vegetarian and then gently transition over a long period of time, eventually to veganism, you could absolutely do it successfully and healthily. And, this is what people have to understand about it. And it is a spiritual approach. It is about not doing harm. It's about doing the least harm possible. You don't want to do harm to people, and you don't want to do harm to other living creatures. I won't even smash a bug in my home. If I see a bug, I'll capture it and take it outside. That's it. Yeah. That being has every right to exist as I do. And that's not a crazy notion. That's not something that should be so foreign or alien to us. No. What if an alien species that's much larger than us comes down and goes, oh, look at these little bugs, and starts smashing us? We won't want that to happen, right? And what you can imagine, there's all kinds of large beings probably in the universe that are much larger in scale than us. I could certainly imagine that. Okay, probably they were here among us in the ancient past.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want them stepping on us. Well, I treat other animals as if they have the right to their own lives, because they do. And it's totally. Like, if we can if we can find a way to exist and prosper and thrive without having to do damage to either humans or other animals, I'm going to choose the path of least harm. That's what the moral thing to do is. That's what the thing where I've chosen the right path and I've chosen conscience is to do the least amount of harm possible. And that's why eating a plant-based diet is involved in that process. And it's not as hard as people think. You're not going to sacrifice as much as you think you're going to sacrifice. Plant-based foods taste really great and are very healthy for you. And, don't eat plant-based junk food. There's junk food in the vegan community and the vegetarian community, of course. Stick with a healthy diet, eat things that are nutritious, high nutrient density, transition to that way of life. You don't have to do it cold turkey, pun intended, or quote unquote cold turkey. Okay. You don't need to give it up all in one day. You could do it over a period of a couple of years, or even several years like I did. So, I don't beat people up for their current dietary choices that they were often indoctrinated into, but I will say, I think that they should, take it under advisement to transition to a healthy plant-based diet way of eating over a long period of time. And you'll do it successfully if you do it like that.
Yeah. And for me, if one wants to walk, with the principles of natural law, it's just very clear that if we do not want beings who perceive themselves to be of more consciousness than us to abuse us, then we can't do it to beings that we perceive to have less consciousness than us. I mean, look at what's happening now. What we've been doing, we've been forcefully containing, enslaving other beings, microchipping them, vaccinating them. And now what's happening to us by beings who perceive themselves to be of higher consciousness than us. I mean, this is all our creation, clearly. So veganism for me is a key to get ourselves out of that dynamic also.
That's right. This is the law of correspondence. What we do will be done unto us. It's inescapable. It's cosmic law. It's natural law.
Mark, I would love to do like a 3-hour marathon with you, but you've got another interview coming. So would you just let our viewers know what are your current projects that you're working on?
Sure. Well, of course, my main website is whatonearthishappening.com. That's a tremendous body of information that you can follow in a stepwise progression if you go through all of the podcasts in order from number one at your own pace. There's also a lot of video seminars and lectures up on that site in the video section. I also have coming the One Great Work Network. It is not live yet, but we are going to have a tremendous collective of spiritual teachers and people who are advocates of freedom and natural law all together on one network that we're going to be doing 24/7 live streaming of people's content. We're going to have all the content creators on the network have their own individual blogs on the site. It's going to be a huge collection of information, and it's going to show people what people who have chosen to do the great work are capable of doing, and hopefully inspire others to do the same. So that's coming soon. So Henna, I want to thank you for inviting me onto the show. This was great. Your questions were awesome, and I want to thank you for what you're doing to advance the One Great Work.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been an absolute joy and a gift to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.